I really don't have a clever way to introduce this one, so let's just get into it. RRR. This, All right, so little peek behind the curtain. One of the things I'm really trying to do this year, and it's kind of become a little bit of a side focus in addition to try and catch up on commission reviews, is I'm trying to be sure to the best of my ability that I see things that have come out this year that maybe I didn't see initially, but to see them before the end of the year, especially if I think they have a shot at making my top 10 of the year. That was part of why I made sure to get to A League of Their Own. It's part of why I really was excited and was very happy to get to Everything Everywhere All at Once. There's a number of other things that like I think I've got a good chance of that making the top 10 or at least being considered, so I should try and get that in. One of those was this. Now, the first thing is, to be clear, my experience with Indian film at all is very, very limited. Now, this technically isn't Bollywood. I believe it's Tollywood, is because of the region it's produced in. Again, like my knowledge is limited, and I apologize for that in advance. This is not my first go at not only Indian cinema, but this kind of Indian cinema, because back when the commission reviews were going on the main channel, I did a review of the previous two-film story that the same director did, Bahubali, which you can check that review out there. And I enjoyed it quite a bit. And again, that was like really my first taste of this kind of, and I don't know how representative this guy's movies are of a lot of what else is done in Indian cinema, but I got to tell you, this was so much fun. This was incredible. Like this thing is 3 hours long. And I even watched it in several sessions, but it never dragged. A 3-hour movie that never feels like it, oh, that should have been trimmed, that could have been cut back. I never felt that. Ever. And especially considering how many action scenes there are that on paper don't really need to be there and how much slow-mo there is. I should have been like rolling my eyes about halfway through. I was not. I was not. If there is a single word to describe this movie, it is extra. Everything is extra. Everything is the cranked up to 11 version of what it's going to be. And it establishes that right off the bat. And the funny thing is, again, on paper, I shouldn't like something that is this heightened all the time, all the way through, because that should be numbing. It should, others have said, and I've said as well, if you crank it up to 11 and just stay there, that's the same as staying at 1 because there's no variance. You've reset it as the normal. So it might as well just be at a 1 the whole time because it never changes. The thing is, with this, the intensity level never changes, but what it's using that intensity level on does. So there are action scenes cranked up to 11. There are dance scenes cranked up to 11. There are romantic interludes cranked up to 11. There are training montages cranked up to 11. All of it. And there's emotional bits cranked up to 11. Like, okay, this thing is absurd. And that is not derogatory in any way. It's absurd in the most glorious ways. This is like, if I were to actually try and put it in American genres, this is effectively a superhero movie. It might as well be for the way that it approaches stuff. But you know what? If you have no experience in Indian cinema, the movie I would compare it to, but I'm going to be real careful on how I compare it because I actually think this is much better, would actually be Zack Snyder's 300 in terms of the degree to which everything was heightened in that. You know, the Spartan Warriors weren't just buff. They were like ultra mega buff. They, weren't just deadly. They were ultra deadly. The people who they faced weren't just, bad people. They were literal monsters. And that's one of the areas, like, say, 300 took it too far by literally demonizing the representatives of an entire race of people. But, like, I do enjoy 300, but the movie's got problems. The movie's got big, big problems. But that level of just cranking it, that's what this movie does. But in service of not anything that 300 is doing. Because if there's another word other than extra that I would give to this movie, it is triumphant. The amount of catharsis that comes from the moments in these movies, the level of just fist pumping, like end of the movie, I literally cried out, yeah. Because there's a specific bit at the end that I was just like, yes, absolutely. And like, I might even cite it later if I remember to. Or if I forget to, ask me in the comments and I'll tell you. So just the fist pumping, yes, nature of this. And I haven't even talked about the story. Okay. So this is a insanely fictionalized look at two real historical figures from British-ruled India, from that point in the history, sort of early 20th century. And the fact that this is heavily fictionalized, I'll touch on that a little bit later. Just take a pin in that, I'll come back to it. But these were two people who really existed. They are being shown doing not things that, so far as I could find, they actually did. And they most likely never knew each other. But it is sort of taking the essence of the myths of these people. What was the kind of thing they were known for in their revolutionary fight against the British occupation, and taking that and putting it in this framing story where you have one of them coming from the more tribal areas, who's basically coming to try and rescue his sister, who was effectively kidnapped by the governor because the governor's wife thought it'd be nice to have that child around the house. She sings pretty. She's ours now. Yeah. Here's the thing. I'll touch on this real quick. You remember how I mentioned 300 really overstepped by making the Persians and that literally monstrous, and how that was actually kind of messed up? Here's the funny thing about this with how it demonizes the British, because it does, but like by showing them doing stuff that, yeah, they pretty much did. They didn't have to literally turn them into monsters. They just had to show the worst of what was actually happening. And I call that more than fair. So anyways, moving on from that, so that's one, that's Beam. And then the other one, Raju, he is actually an officer, an Indian officer in the British military services there, serving under the governor. And we find out more about him later that like complicates that. But these are two people who are initially, as presented, on opposite sides of the situation. As we find out later, they actually have similar causes, but they are coming at them in different from different sides, and that still kind of puts them at odds in a way. But they meet, they become amazing friends, and to watch everything build. And the way these characters are introduced, I feel like the best way I can explain the degree to which this stuff is heightened is to explain the way these characters are introduced. Raju, so at the scene he's shown in, there's this outpost, like with barbed wire fences, this British outpost, and it is completely surrounded by Indians. And like, I got to get used to saying that. I'm still weird saying it because, I grew up with the whole cowboy and Indian thing, with that being used as a term for Native American. So it still throws me off to use it, but it's like, I'm using it properly now. I got to get over that. But in any case, like when I say completely surrounded, I mean like the number of extras they had in this, it was like on the scale of those old biblical epics from like the 1950s, like Cleopatra level, like that's how massively surrounded. This was like Zulu level stuff. But there's this barbed wire, but there's this one guy in the crowd who throws a rock, and the commander at the post said, "Arrest that man." And of course, none of the British officers are like gonna budge, because like the fence is the only thing keeping them from being torn apart by this crowd. And Raju jumps the barbed wire fence and beats his way through literally hundreds of people to get hold of this guy and drag him back. And when I said he's effectively superheroes, like the thing is, I said kind of like superheroes because the amount of punishment they both take and dish out is superhuman levels. But that is the exaggeration that is involved in this kind of film, in this genre of film, at least so far as I understand it. But the thing is, like, I say that these characters, again, for American point of reference, actually bear a closer resemblance to, say, Rocky from the Rocky Balboa things, because it's not about being invincible. It's about getting back up every time you get knocked down, because both Raju and Beam get knocked down and hard repeatedly. But that's part of what makes the triumph of them coming back from that so cathartic and gets you that literal fist pumping. Because it's not like they show up and just always mop the floor with whatever's facing them. More often than not, they are going to take a beating, and they're going to have moments where it's like, I don't know if they'll get out of this, which just makes any time that they do, and like it feels legitimate like that. I don't know how they get through that, and then they do, and it's so good. But with Beam, so he's introduced out in the woods, and he is initially trying to lure a wolf that is going to chase him, and he's going to lead it into a trap, so that sort of the local hunters from his village can capture it. The thing is, he ends up getting chased not by a wolf, but by a tiger. And you get to see him try and deal with that. And I don't want to say how that goes down exactly, but like it's so intense and so good. And again, so triumphant. A lot of this is the music. The music across the whole thing does such an amazing job of taking what are frankly absurd moments, visually and narratively absurd moments, and the music hits just the right way, and it builds at just the right time, and it goes over dramatic in just the right ways that it tunes you in not only to the intensity level by which it is meant to come across. The music being as amped up as the visuals keeps you in line with the fact that this is how it's supposed to be. The visuals being this intense aren't a mistake. They aren't accidentally overdone and then the music is too low key. The music is just as big, just as bombastic, and again, it should be too much. 3 hours of this especially should be too much. I should have been overloaded and exhausted. But the times that I had to break because I had other stuff to do, it bummed me out because I'm like, I want to keep watching. I was not bored. I was not overwhelmed. I was not worn out. This is an amazing movie. I cannot wait to watch this again. I cannot wait to find people in my life who haven't seen it so that I can show them this. And all the performances are great. They're very melodramatic performances. Subtlety is not a word that exists anywhere near the production of this film. No subtlety at any point. It didn't need it. It didn't have use for it. So nobody's giving a finely tuned, nuanced performance, but these are perfect performances for what they are, including from the non-Indian cast, because you have Ray Stevenson in to be the governor, and he makes a good bastard. And this was great. I figured this out. The woman who's playing the governor's wife, who I mentioned, she's just I want to take this child. So I thought I recognized her, and I looked it up. It's the actress who played Elsa in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. She was kind of the double agent. She was working with the Nazis. And I found extra joy in that, because while it wasn't Last Crusade specifically, the fact that they pulled an actress from a series that did India real dirty, that was Temple of Doom that did that. But to have her be an embodiment of all this horrible stuff that white people did, that's a good pull. I don't know if they did. I don't know if that was part of why she was cast, whether it was or wasn't on purpose. I just love that as a fact. And the other thing I wanted to come back on, I did mention these are real life figures, but and the reason I want to touch on that is I have brought up before some issues with mythologizing real world people. I talked about this years ago, again, over on the main channel, sort of after seeing The Greatest Showman, which is a movie I really like, but it does make me a little uncomfortable that they actually say, well, this is P.T. Barnum. And I really wish they just created a P.T. Barnum-esque character, but made it original so that they weren't mythologizing and potentially smoothing over a lot of problems with him, even in something as exaggerated as a musical. But here's part of why it doesn't bother me here. And honestly, the more toned down and less bombastic, like biopics and historical things about real people are, the more they tend to bother me in terms of like smoothing off rough edges and creating an image that probably is flattering but not accurate for a lot of these people. It doesn't bother me so much here, which admittedly partially is cultural distance. I don't know a lot about these people beyond what I just looked up out of curiosity after seeing the movie. But the other thing is that as exaggerated as, say, The Greatest Showman was, it is nowhere near. It doesn't hold a candle to how exaggerated this is. And this is so exaggerated. And also, what these people are even doing, like in terms of the narrative, is so far removed from what they actually did that the fact that they share names with real historical figures is almost a little bit of an affectation, because since the instant you look up anything about them, you realize, well, that, okay, literally nothing we saw in the movie is what happened. Again, so far as I found. But that kind of gives you permission to just enjoy it as a film and to not adopt this mythologized version as the version in your head of what these people were really like. Because that was kind of the thing with P.T. Barnum and The Greatest Showman, because yes, it was hyper exaggerated and stylized with it being a musical and everything, but they still had this version of P.T. Barnum do the bullet point stuff that P.T. Barnum did. Open a museum of curiosity, hire quote unquote freaks, turn it into a circus, sponsor an opera singer, travel to England. Like the bullet points were his life. And so it still kind of invites that, think of him this way. Whereas this doesn't feel like that's doing that. Aside from the fact that I feel like what is being celebrated about these two people in this movie is more worth celebrating than the mythologizing that went on with Barnum, which felt a lot more like ignoring every bad thing that ever happened with him. Whereas this, like these characters are not particularly flawed or anything, but at the same time they are so exaggerated, and what's being celebrated about them is resilience and determination and fighting for freedom. And yeah, those are things worth valorizing, I think, a bit more than one guy's pursuit of fame and pretending like he was a philanthropist when a lot of issues there. But anyways, I think that's all I want to say about this. This is so good. I've seen a couple of things in the last month or two that have just been like, where was this stuff? And it's like, it's completely overshadowed in my mind so much stuff that I had hopes for, but turned out kind of mediocre. A lot of the Marvel stuff, if I'm being honest, if I'm going to be mean about it. But boy, is it really great to just see amazing stuff. And I did have hopes for this because I like Bahubali, but I like Bahubali a lot. This blows it out of the water. And for some reason, when I watched it on Netflix, the audio defaulted to Portuguese. If it does that to you, change it to Hindi. If for no other reason than when you do that, the English dialogue spoken by the white actors and characters will actually be said in English. And it helps minimize the issue of like, okay, I know that, there's subtitles and I don't know this language, but those sounds don't appear to be matching those lips. So like, if for some reason check the dubbing, when you watch it, because for some reason it defaulted to Portuguese dubbing for me. Changed it to Hindi, it was even better. Like, it was still a really good movie. I didn't realize till about halfway in. It was still a really good movie, but like, it got even better after that. So yeah, random note. Have you seen this thing? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon's what pays the bills. Like, share, subscribe, help me out as well. But don't worry too much about it, because we take a relaxed and hopefully fun attitude around here. So you can just come on back next time you need a break or to get energized. This movie's good for that. Time to give my thanks to my highest supporting patrons. That would include Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime,
Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Emu Delkey, Theotha Boyd, Becky Sparks, Fernabi Likes the Poodle, Zach, Idolin, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Adam RDL Taylor, Shane Ross, Shaylee Gourlay, Brendan LaRose, and TT. If you want your name said while these guys try and distract me, consider looking at the rewards on my Patreon.